The End Item Manager. This is the landing page. The End Item Manager comprises of two business tools, the End Item Manager and the component technical drawings, which are created from the End Item Manager. So let's enter the End Item Manager. The home page contains a table with all the previous end items. We've got division column, projects, program description, a name, the customer, the date it was last updated, and the date it was created. Over here in the division, I'm only interested in seeing the end items that belong to the division that I work in. So I have filtered it by Actify. This selection will be remembered by the browser, so each time I return, I will only be presented with the end items of the division that I work in. If I wanted to see the other divisions, I can do so like this. Let's create an end item now. We need to select the division, projects, and customer. Let's select a division or multiple divisions. Select a project or multiple projects. Select a customer. And now that we've got the three fields populated, click Create. The end item has been created. We've got two panels. The top panel contains all the information that we saw on the home page. We can enter a name, C-Scooter, as this is the assembly we're going to be looking at. Click Save. And I'm just going to collapse this top panel. The second panel contains two grids. We've got the assembly grid at the top and the component grid at the bottom. Let's add an assembly. I'm going to search for C-Scooter. Click OK to select. The C-Scooter's top assembly is going to be loaded in the assembly grid and all of its components below. The assembly grid will have the assembly name with a thumbnail, the customer product number, which has been pre-populated by reading the CAD data, internal product number for manual entry, and we've got previous customer and previous internal product numbers, which we'll look at a little bit later. At the end, we've got a menu, which we can update the assembly, remove the assembly, or go and see the assembly in Central. The component grid contains the columns for component name with a thumbnail, the number of times that component appears in the assembly, the customer product number, again taken from the CAD attributes, an internal product number, the previous customer and previous internal product numbers, and two drop-downs. We've got the component group, which we can choose from purchase components, manufactured components, fasteners, or directed by, in this case a fastener, and choose a supplier as well. If we look at the fin component here, we're going to select manufactured component, and Actify is going to manufacture it. I'm going to save my changes. The last column here, CTD, is the component technical drawing. If we click to open the menu here, we can create the CTD, or we can go see the catalog part in Central. So let's click Create CTD. Once it's created, the menu turns blue to indicate that this component has got a CTD created for it. Click to open the menu again. We can now delete the CTD or go view it. So let's click View CTD. The top panel again contains all the information you'd expect to see in the home page and a thumbnail for the component. We can choose to replace the thumbnail by clicking here and say Edit Resource and replace the thumbnail with a Spinfire web file. That way we can utilize Spinfire Web in our business tool. Below we've got the material panel containing information about the material. Some of those fields have been pre-populated, as you can see, because we can read the information from the CAD attributes and the physical properties. Some of those fields are just for manual entry. Other fields will be calculated based on other ones. For example, the estimated weight here is calculated based on the volume and the density. So if I enter a density, the estimated weight is calculated. We've got the surface area, we've got the total CAD surface area, and the estimated total Class A. Total Class A refers to the area that will be painted. And we say it's estimated because we've just taken the total surface area and divided it by 2. We do that because you usually just have to paint one side and not the other. These fields, of course, can just be modified. We've got the CAD dimensions as well. And as you've noticed, we've got both metric and imperial measurements. If I enter the metric measurement, the imperial is calculated, and vice versa. If I enter imperial, the metric is calculated. Below, we've got the production panel. We've got the quantity per assembly, again taken from the CAD attributes. The customer volume, I enter the volume for yearly, monthly, weekly, and daily is calculated. We've got some fields related to the equipment and machines that we're going to use to manufacture the component, information about the gauge type, and any other supporting or related equipment that we will require. The bottom panel is just a notes panel where you can add free text for any other information you might require. I'm going to save my changes. And at the top panel here, we also have a link back to the end item which we created this CTD from. So let's click this link and it will take us back. The end item manager was created to support what is called an 150% assembly. What we mean by that is that you could be creating different versions or models of the same assembly. So for example, we've got the basic C-scooter here, and I'm now going to add the C-scooter Pro. All the components for the C-scooter Pro have been added in the component grid as well. Any components that belong to both only appear once. Notice how the count has disappeared, as each component might have a different count in each assembly. To view that better, I'm going to click on the rotate grids to change the view to have the grid side by side. I can now click on an assembly and the component grid will load all the components for that assembly alone. Notice how the count has reappeared. If I click on the C-scooter Pro, the components for the C-scooter Pro will appear. I can now select multiple assemblies at the same time by holding down the control button. Now, the component grid has loaded all the components that belong to both assemblies. If the count is the same for each component in both assemblies, then you can see the count. If the count varies, then you see the word varies. I'm going to return to the previous view. Now an assembly update has come in for the C-scooter Pro, and I want to update this. So I'm going to click on the button here and say Update Assembly. I'm going to look for the updated assembly, select it, click OK. On the left-hand side here, I have got the existing assembly, and on the right-hand side, I've got the new assembly I want to update it with. I've got the names of each assembly at the top and the customer product numbers below. The grids underneath contain the exclusive parts for each assembly. What I mean by that is any common parts are not presented. These parts only belong to the C-scooter Pro, and these parts only belong to version 2. For this particular example, there is no correlation between the product numbers of the C-scooter Pro to the C-scooter Pro version 2. That is the same for each part. If there was a correlation between them, then this mapping step could be done automatically. But because this is not the case, we will have to do this manually. So if I want to link this part here and say it's going to be replaced by this part here, I click on the row, and then I click on the row of the component that I want to map it to. Click Map. It turns orange to indicate that this row has now been mapped. I can do that again. If I were to double click, it will look on the other grid and try and find a component with the same name. If it finds it, it will be selected. I'm going to do this so all my parts are mapped. I can select the rows again to see which component it maps to. If I've made a mistake, I can just click Unmap. And once I'm happy with the mappings, I can just click the Update button. I'm presented with a confirmation message, which also tells me what's going to happen in a second. So mapped components will have customer product number and internal product number recorded in the previous product number columns. So let's click save and see what that does. As we can see, the C-Scooter Pro version 2 has now replaced the C-Scooter Pro. Its customer number has been put in the customer number column, and the previous customer number has now appeared in the previous customer product number column. If I were to look for the gearbox, which was one of the components that got updated, it's the same with the customer product numbers here. So the new customer product number has been placed in here, and the previous customer number has been recorded for history purposes. That concludes the video for the End Item Manager. Thank you very much for watching.